Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Talent Gap Fireside Chat, where we talk about causes of and solutions to the talent gap. I'm your host, Pete Strauss, and joining me today is Ankush Chowdhary. He's a former VP and Cloud CISO for HPE. Welcome, Ankush.
Thanks, Peter. Pleasure to be here.
Well, thanks for being here. Could you give our audience a little background on yourself and your career thus far?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think it's a long journey. I try to squeeze myself and try to make it as brief as possible for everyone. But I always see myself as a security practitioner first, and a leader by necessity is that how I typically put it, and someone who's worked in building teams, strategy across some of the toughest corners of the industry. I had the privilege to work in 3 different continents and with some great organizations, where I was, able to, cut through the noise, call it the dysfunction and start pushing for accountability. And that brings that practitioner's eye and, what I call as a leader's backbone. So no titles, no fluff, just hard-won insight and a deep commitment in, making cybersecurity better than the mess that it's in today.
Very cool. Yeah. And obviously the job market is a bit of a mess as well, and hiring processes and all that good stuff, which is obviously a lot of what we talk about here. So do you think the talent gap is real? And if so, what would you say it looks like?
I think I've shared so many thoughts on, when it comes to talent gap, when it comes to, finding talent. I think I would say the talent gap is real, but I think it's not for the reasons that you think. It's not because there aren't enough smart people. It's because that we've built a gatekeeping fortress, like guarded by HR dragons and search trolls, right? I think we've got roles asking for 5 years of Kubernetes experience for an entry-level SOC gig, right? And we require like a $500 cert from people who can't afford lunch. And I think we keep pretending that cyber is like some sacred priesthood when half the managers don't know what an EDR actually does. And I think what's worse is that we are handling our cyber leadership roles to, no offense, to marketing people who took a SANS course and rebranded. And then and what the team members think is, where do I get my mentor, right? What I'm going to get mentoring on Excel macros, right? You think that hires are going to look up to that. I think that's where I think we are really looking at literally replacing the skilled leaders with like LinkedIn personas and wondering, why the pipeline's dry. So if I think one of the things that I recently wrote about, which was touching on this topic of why we are seeing, especially in cyber, this massive skill gap is, and I profess for it. I don't know how many people want to support this cause. Is if we start licensing cybersecurity professionals like you do with engineers, with nurses, with electricians, right? There's so much at stake, But we have built these. We have not built like structured apprenticeships. We just have these internships, right? So which would help address the gap. And again, we got to stop this PowerPoint junkies tell us, what qualified looks like, right? And I think that's why I say, the gap isn't talent. I think it's trust. And until we fix that, we are just polishing the brass on the Titanic, right? That's how I look at it.
Gotcha. So what can be done to fix the issues that you see there? Obviously, internships would be a huge step in the right direction, and not enough companies, in my opinion, are doing internships or any sort of training program because, the market is flooded with candidates right now that are experienced and in many cases, many years of experience. So a lot of the companies or hiring managers feel like they don't need to actually hire somebody junior level or develop people if there's people that have 12 out of 10 skill set matches that are on the market and actively applying. How do we square that circle?
Yeah, and I think that's why I say like mentorship is like super important at every level. It's not that people coming into the job market, they need mentoring. I think even medium senior level folks, you need good mentoring. I think if we have mentoring like it's part of the job and not a side quest, and don't hoard knowledge, right? Pass it on, and I've built internships, I often say don't build internships and don't build just excuses. And that's why I was referring to apprenticeships. Like if you look at how the apprenticeship programs were done in the past, right, they're very structured, right? You get this fixed outcome. I think the internships, they're good, they exist. I'm not saying that they're wrong, but I think we just need a little bit more of, how we can teach the juniors to not just how to think, just, what to memorize, and for me, I think, one of the big things is, around this whole, mentoring and internship is, is the will by the organization to make sure that they're taking it seriously, right? And I think that's where we see, a lot of PowerPoints, a lot of documents, a lot of narratives within the organizations on, this is what we need to do. But I don't think so anyone is closely monitoring, measuring the outcomes that should be coming out of it, right? I think that's where the gap is. So, yeah. So if you start putting, real practitioners in charge and start giving, juniors someone worth looking up to, not someone in a banana blazer, just, with fake certs, but, just someone who they can really learn from. And I think we'll see a very, very good outcome once we see that happen in organizations. Unfortunately, it doesn't happen. We don't like someone, we try to replace them rather than fixing them, right? So.
Yeah, well, certainly that is the case. Nowadays, especially, there's seemingly no investment from the companies and the employees, and from the employees into the companies. There's just no loyalty and investment in both directions anymore, it seems. I think part of that is just due to the fact that people are so afraid of being laid off these days by any large company or even the smaller companies. I mean, it almost feels like nowhere is safe right now. That's why I've been telling people that are job seekers, go follow the money, go to the companies that have the most recent round of funding and just do it that way, or somehow ally yourself with the revenue. You want to work as close to the money as humanly possible, because anybody viewed as a cost center right now is having a hard time getting any sort of budget or funding or ability to, any additional resources to do some of the things that you're talking about. So what do we do when we're in such a resource constrained environment where, maybe there's a director or CISO that would like to do more mentorship, but they're already working 60, 70-hour weeks, and they already have a very lean team, and they just don't feel like that they have the cycles or the resources needed to actually effectively mentor somebody.
Yeah, I think that's the real challenge, not just in cyber, right? And, probably cyber budgets are even more, than compared to the rest of the organizations, right? And it's always a challenge. But I think and this is something we have seen very effectively work in a lot of organizations on how cyber talent is built up. And if it's done well, it works quite nicely, right? We often start with, the security operations roles, where you can have these entry level folks who can come in and learn and work as, L1s under L2s, and then progressively make their way from L1 to L2 to L3s. And I think that creates that pipeline where you have people coming in from the lower levels who are learning while they're getting mentored, while they're seeing things in action, which is really, really important. So I think this is just with cyber, and this is just my take. And I come from a background where I have perhaps done nearly every role that exists in cyber. Given my 27 years, I started out right down as analyst, engineer, architect, making my way up, and I think what we see right now is that how this whole certification market has destroyed that. You see folks coming out with 5 days of boot camp and a hoodie, and they think they can take on a nation state based cyber attack that happens to an organization. Or it doesn't work like that, right? So my point is that I think in cyber we see that everyone wants to be a general, but no one wants to be a soldier. Well, you can't be a general if you're not being a soldier, right? So we got to start from that. I need to build and mentor the folks, and not just have those those certifications and those degrees that they have. I'm not saying they're not useful, but none are mandatory, right? You can get a cert, means you studied. You can get a degree means, you survived academia. But, I think experience means that you've taken the punch and you still logged back in and, pick your fighter. So I think that's where I think we need that balance to be there. You do your certs, but they have to follow your career path. And it has to also follow the timeline. I think once interviewed this individual a long time back, and who was, if I'm not mistaken, was 6-7 years of experience, had like a dozen certifications. I've done certifications. It take good 3 to 6 months, right, to study, to pass, right? If you're just collecting the certs just because you want to go through the HR screening process, and I think that's not, and that's what's broken, right? And that's why I say, certs aren't enough, degrees aren't enough, and until we actually regulate the space and we keep having, we're gonna keep having these cyber experts, who are just conference speakers with a hoodie and an ego, right? So. So I think that's how we build the pipeline. Start from the basics, have the interns in, lead them to lower roles, to higher roles, have the mentorship in place, have structure certification in place. I've seen some orgs who actually do that very well, but I don't think so many are successful in getting that outcome. So.
Yeah, well, there's a few threads to pull on there. One being the certification thing. I mean, I can certainly tell you from a recruiter's perspective, I think the certification companies have done the industry a disservice, and I don't fault anybody for wanting to make money necessarily, but at the same time, I think a lot of promises or hollow promises are being made to candidates. Like, look, get the certification, you'll be more marketable, you'll get that $100,000 job in security, and that's been going on for so long at this point. That we have this massive pipeline of people that are, like you said, kind of paper tigers, where they have way too many certifications for their level of experience, not a lot of hands-on experience, and very few companies are willing to actually train or mentor these folks. So they're not necessarily appropriate for the roles that hiring managers actually want to hire for. And there's just not enough people stepping up to the plate. Meanwhile, the hiring processes with such a candidate heavy market, it's hard to justify hiring somebody that you need to mentor or train if you have your pick of the litter, so to speak. And obviously I talked to the hiring managers about this, like, look, be realistic in your requirements. But I think there's often a sense that from the hiring side, hey, we can be as picky as we want if we're getting 1,000 applicants per role. Whose responsibility, I guess, is it to adjust expectations or to encourage hiring managers to be more willing to train and mentor?
Yeah, no, I mean, you're right. I think certification organizations have done a fantastic job, right? So, get the cert and you are a pro. I think where they fail, and if you look at, I have some very, there's some certifications are very respectful because it truly takes, hard work in order to get those certifications, right? And there are a few out there.
And demonstration of expertise, not just multiple choice tests. Yeah.
Right. It's like you look at the offensive security ones, which is full hands-on lab, right? I mean, that's anyone coming out of it, you can't just answer like 20 multiple choice questions and you have the certification. And then there are others who are like a reading exam, like there are trick questions in there. It's not testing your knowledge on cyber, just testing, how good you are in picking up trick questions. And I think that's where we need to cut that fluff out, right? If you really want someone to be certified, just vendor certifications don't cut it. I mean, you may have a vendor certification. What do I do if I don't use that vendor? Look at the speed of number of products in security that get launched. We have like probably one every day. So I think having that broad experience, that's why when I am hiring for folks, if I'm looking at broader certifications. When we look at architecture and saying, hey, have you got TOGAF experience? Do you know how do you do requirement analysis, how to build solutions, right? Do you have SAPSA? I think those broader certifications help. And if you really want like engineering background, right, hands-on, what's your hands-on experience versus, what a paper certification that you have. And I think those have more value rather than, and if you ask, and I'm pretty sure, the number of candidates you see, and my personal experience and have shared with some of my peers is the higher the number of certifications a candidate has, the harder they fall. And this is very, very common. You look at the certifications, you go through the technical questions, and they're just unable to answer, right? And that just shows you that they're just, fudged through the certifications, right? As sad it is, but we do see massive amount of candidates who actually do that. So I think that whole thing needs to be fixed, right? This whole certification market and how we test, how we train, and that's why I was touching on the concept of licensing, right? Things are high stake in cyber now. You have data thefts happening, privacy at risk, financial data, healthcare data. You can't just put someone who has no training in charge of running that level of work. So I think we need to start looking at that very, very seriously. Yeah.
Who do you think then would manage the licensure? Is this a government play, or could the private sector do it somehow?
Yeah, I mean, I put few thoughts and ideas and on how this could be done. It could be, and we've seen how independent nonprofit organizations have done that, but we do need a licensing body who actually can run through that. And we don't need to just boil the ocean. We just start with we start with critical sector. We start with utilities, we start with financial sector. Things that are high impact, and then try and expand it across. But you really want people who are tested through it, right? Who have passed the exam, right? I mean, you can't just put someone behind the wheels if they just don't know how to drive, right? So, I think that's why we see, on an average, you go to LinkedIn, you always see one job gets advertised at like 500 people who have already applied in like less than an hour, right? Because there is no filtering mechanism to say that, hey, at the first step, I can tell you don't qualify. Or you can't do it, right? You don't have the credentials to even be in that position, but people just apply, and I think from a recruiter's perspective, it's just a nightmare, right? How many applications are you looking at in a day, right? And it's I think that issue needs to be solved. It's and then that creates a whole different level of complexity for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I think one potential case study would be like the CPA. The AI CPA is a licensing body that oversees all CPAs, and they have peer review instituted and things like that for the CPA company side. That said, they are getting some flack recently for, not overseeing SOC 2s as well as possibly they could have. It's not a perfect system, but it's something. I could see that where there's an industry body specific to the industry that's kind of overseeing licensure for that industry. I do like the idea of doing it that way, because in my experience, a lot of companies only want to hire from the same industry anyway. They just want to hire people from direct competitors, and that's what 99% of hiring seems to boil down to, is as this person had the same job yesterday at a competitor. So
yeah, that's very true. Yeah, if you end up being in an organization that no one sees as competitor, good luck. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, that's very common. I think that's why some of the biggest hiring challenges that we see is that the entire hiring process is like an escape room designed by a sadist, right? So we have these job descriptions asking for experience in tools that don't exist. We have interviews conducted by people who couldn't explain the role if their career depended on it, and then let's not forget that 7-stage interview gauntlet like logic puzzles that would just make Alan Turing roll his eyes, right? It's like you just I think we say we want diverse talent, right? And we want fresh perspectives, and then we reject someone for not knowing the difference between NIST 853 and 800-171 in a second round behavioral interview, right? This isn't hiring. This is just academia hazing, dressed up as due diligence, right? So, and that's why, when I say pipeline, there is no pipeline. It's like a leaky garden hose, right? It's people are coming with as a 2-week boot camps, right, and applying for the roles, and that's not even a junior analyst role. They're like, I call them security liability with caffeine access, right? So it's if you really want solutions, how we need to standardize role expectations. We need to train interviewers. We need to pair candidates with actual humans instead of HR filters. And maybe we remember that we are in a people business, not in a fantasy football with a draft of CISSPs, right? So I think that's where our biggest hiring challenges come, right? How we select, how we hire, how we interview, right? And it's the entire process has, at least this is just my experience. Someone might disagree with my view, but that's something that I've seen firsthand. So,
well, it sounds to me like you would say we need more experts. We need more expert people that are hiring managers, and I would say that we need more expert recruiters that are industry specialists. Like, I think that's where a lot of hiring challenges come down to, is the recruiters don't know what they're looking for, so they'll default to just posting a job and praying and hoping somebody qualified applies, but they don't really know what good looks like. And the hiring managers don't necessarily take the time to educate the recruiters, or if they do, the recruiters may just not be technical enough. Like, they just don't understand the technical terminology well enough to be effective in screening people. So you end up having people that would be 10 out of 10 matches that are getting screened out in that first round. And I've heard from so many hiring managers over the years. I've literally referred people to my internal recruiters, said, interview this person, they're amazing, and then pass them on to me. And they'll get caught out for some random reason. And the hiring manager will say, well, I don't care. Bring them on to me to the next round, the hiring manager interview, and they'll keep getting blocked by the internal recruiters or HR or whomever. And I have to wonder, like, how is it that hiring managers, in some cases directors or CISOs, how are they getting hamstrung by HR or internal recruiters? How is it that in these organizational hierarchies, the CISO is getting upstaged by somebody who's down and over, in the organizational hierarchy? Any idea how that's happening? Because I've always wondered.
Yeah. So, this is like, working with HR and recruiting. So, how to work with them. So I think let me preface this with love, right? So I don't hate HR, but I think HR thinks cybersecurity is vibe. It's not a domain. And I think recruiting, it's a tragic comedy, right? You send them a clear rec, no offense to anyone. It says needs hands-on experience in detection engineering, and what you get back is someone who ran a phishing awareness campaign, right, once in 2016, and they call them some cybersecurity evangelists, right? I think it's not all their fault. I think recruiters are under a lot of pressure. They're drowning in these keyword matches, right? While we are writing these job descriptions, like with no clarity, right? I think, but the biggest thing I would say is the complete disconnect between technical needs and hiring filters. I think that ATS eats qualified candidates alive, really does. And I think, and we wonder why we are left interviewing people, whose GitHub is like a graveyard, right? And how do we fix it, right? It's like we need to, I think you touched on it, we need to cross-train recruiters. We need to embed them with the teams. We need to let the hiring managers write, the top 3 must-haves in normal English, right? And here's my wild idea, let humans read resumes again, right? It's you are investing in hiring someone, you're taking them through such a long process. Hiring is not cheap, and if you want to find talent, act like the job is important enough to deserve that effort, right? So I think if we start putting those kind of efforts rather than just letting the ATS do its job, I think we'll start finding some good quality candidates, and to your point, start focusing on training these recruiters so that they know what to look for. And there's some brilliant ones. I've worked with some really, really brilliant security recruiters. I think they just know the domain really, really well. But I think we do have a major chunk out there who's just still doing keyword matches. So.
Well, and to be clear, I'm a security specialist recruiter, and I start with keyword matches, and I don't post a job and just kind of hope I get somebody qualified that comes in, because that's roughly 95% failure rate. I think it's a huge waste of time. I go out to the market and I find people. I put together a Boolean search string, search LinkedIn, search my database, ask for referrals. So yeah, there is some keyword matching going on there, but ultimately, when we determine a match for a candidate, it's because we've spoken with that person and validated that the keywords they have in their LinkedIn or their resume are actually representative of the skills that they have. And to be able to evaluate that, you have to have some level of domain expertise to be able to do that. I mean, you can't have somebody who's never filled a security role before asking somebody about the difference between detection engineering and GRC. They don't have the experience. to push back on anything that somebody's telling them. So, ultimately us recruiters are, at least in some capacity, gatekeepers. Like it's our job to make sure that somebody's qualified and makes it through to the hiring manager, whether we're doing outbound sourcing like I do, or whether they're, in a lot of cases relying on inbound applications. But it takes a lot of time to develop that expertise. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. Like, I've been recruiting in security 11 plus years now, and I'm still learning stuff every day. And I'm most comfortable in the realm of GRC, since that's what I've recruited the most for, along with DFIR is probably my, and sales, sort of 3 strongest buckets. But I could go out and fill a security engineering role or AppSec role. It would take some research on the front end, because I'm not familiar with all that terminology as well as I know, say, GRC or DFIR. But to truly be an expert in something, it takes years and years and years. And I think the unfortunate reality is, like you said, the internal recruiting teams are often overworked. They're running super lean. They may have 20, 30 open jobs on their desk at any given time. And that's a lot of jobs to fill. And often they're very well spread out. Could be accounting assistant, could be marketing senior manager, could be CISO. And for them to, like, effective recruiting requires some sort of research on the front end. Basically always, to be effective in filling a role. But you can't do too much research if you have 30 open jobs at once,
No, I think you're right. I think the two things in here, just giving you the candidate side of you. If you go and reach out to some of these service providers who now say, hey, we can fix your LinkedIn profile, we can fix your CV, and we can make sure that you are searchable. I think there's so much effort put on telling candidates that, hey, you know what, this is what LinkedIn recruiter view looks like, and if this is the job that you're looking for and you're not appearing in the first page, that means, fat chance of you getting selected, right? So how do I get you on first page? Just like become like an SEO equivalent of, for candidates, right? So, which is such a wrong motivation. Like, I'm not investing in my skills. I'm now looking at how do I market myself. So yeah, I think that's, there's just a candidate side of the problem. But I think I'll touch on something which I personally find like, and this is just recent experience, I've been through CISO interviews recently, and one of the things I say, it's not just the recruiters, it's also hiring managers. It's if you're struggling to find talent, this is my advice to hiring managers who are struggling to find talent. Look in the mirror. You might be the problem. It's as simple as that. It's in cyber. If anyone says that, hey, I'm looking for a senior executive or a CISO level position where I want someone who is, specialized in high trust or HIPAA or, some of the fintech regulatory requirements. Well, you're looking for a compliance manager, buddy. You're not looking for an executive, right? I mean, go look for a compliance manager. So I think, if your job post reads like a ransom note of acronyms and you still use like phrases like rockstar and self-star, right? You are not attracting talent. You're like repelling it, right? And I think good candidates don't want to jump through flaming hoops of a 3% raise and then get a Slack channel full of passive-aggressive policy debates. I think they want growth, they want clarity, they want mentorship, and they want a boss who isn't afraid of their own technical ignorance. And I don't know how many times I see that in organizations where, and this is the most unspoken interview question: how does this candidate make me look good? Right? And so here's my advice, we've got to stop looking for unicorns. And I think I was just making this comment on something you posted very recently, right? We are not hiring for Hogwarts. We hire people who are smart, who are curious, who are coachable, and then you invest in them, you train them, you promote them, and say, for the love of Kali Linux, give them real work and just don't give them watching jobs, right? I think that's where I see this disconnect on not just on the recruiter side, but even on the hiring manager side, on what the expectations are and how they project and how they advertise, right? So it's more structure is needed around that. So
well, it's interesting you brought up the idea that basically job seekers are needing to be marketers these days. I think that's just kind of a natural outgrowth of the state of the industry right now. When there is so much noise and so little signal, you have to stand out above the fray and the noise somehow. And the best way to do that is to have a personal brand and have a strong network. If you're one of 1,000 applications and the recruiter only gets through the first 100 before they just auto reject all the rest, then it doesn't really matter how good you are at the end of the day, unless you already know somebody or they've seen your LinkedIn post or something like that. And I think companies could be doing a much better job on the branding front as well, highlighting why they're a great company to work for. But I think at this point in the market, they don't feel like they need to. We don't need to market to candidates. They're coming to us because, a lot of people are out of work right now and we can be as picky as we want. We have all the leverage. But I think you definitely get out of hiring what you put into it, whether that's, selling people on the job that you have in the interview process or on the job posting or the job description, like you mentioned. Having those red flags is going to turn off a lot of very well qualified people, saying rock star or, we're a family. That's another good one. What are some ways that you think, I guess companies could be more effective in attracting those top candidates? Like we talked about some of the red flags. What about the green flags?
No, I think it's important to see that we are hiring based on merit. That's really important, right? And I think the bigger issue is not what the organizations need to do. I think just regard from job postings and everything else, I think you touched on this point that, hey, if the candidate knows someone in the organization or someone refers them, that we find that's probably the easiest way someone gets through the door. But is this the best candidate, or is just that they know someone in there, right? The other place we see hiring happen, and you talked about, is competitors, right? Someone is coming from a competitor and I see whoever I can poach from there, right? So those two buckets exist, which I don't think so is a fair way of hiring, right? If you are truly looking to hire the best candidate to run through the job that you have, then you need to have a fair process of looking at talent and have a structured way to interview, so you can compare candidates across similar backgrounds, similar expertise, and say, who's the best one to do the job, rather than who do I know, right? I think that needs to be fixed. That's where we say if there is a hidden job market, 70% of jobs are not advertised. Well, I say 100% of jobs are advertised, only 80% go to the ones which are just listed over there because they already have someone in mind even before the job ad went on, right? So that has to be fixed. So, we now see literally, and I have seen that in my past experiences, that when a job ad goes out, it's just going there to be listed because I need to meet the requirement to show that I'm fair, but I know who I'm going to bring in.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that there's a good solution to that, unfortunately.
No.
I mean, I think at the end of the day, people want to work with people that they know or that they know that they like. It's just a emotional, psychological, human reality that, we want to work with people that we know and like. Do you see any way around that other than recruiters such as me pushing back on, I know you already know this other guy, but this guy's actually, or gal is a better fit based on X, Y, and Z reasons. Like, whose responsibility in a given organization or as an external partner is it to help people see the light?
It's an interesting one because, likable does not equal to workable.
Competent,
probably the best candidate, right? But here's the thing, reduce the clutter on LinkedIn. If you already have identified someone you're going to hire, don't waste my time. It's disappointing if you talk to a lot of people who've been job hunting from a very long time and they keep on applying for these roles, which are going nowhere. It's like, the system is rigged and these poor girls are applying for jobs, and and then they're like, hey, why don't get a reply? Because, well, it's just there to show. So I don't think that's going to go away, right? It's the system how it works, right? But I think the way it will get fixed, the way I think it will be when you very consciously look for people who are best to do the job rather than people who I know or people who are likable. I'm not saying that being likable is not a requirement. It is, but what is more important is that someone can do the job. How do you get someone calm, clear during a crisis situation? Likable doesn't help you that time, right? So in fact, it works quite the opposite. You can't really say things to the likable person. Yeah. So yeah, I think it's just conscious effort from the leaders to make sure that we're hiring the right way, we're hiring the fair way, and we're getting the best person for the job.
Yeah, well, it's certainly a good point that a lot of jobs are posted just for show. I can think of a couple examples for some DFIR firms that I'm familiar with that have these like managing director level roles posted. They already have somebody in mind, of course, but they're still getting 500 plus applications. I try to refer a buddy of mine who basically ran an entire DFIR firm. He'd be a perfect fit for it. And they're like, well, no, we really already have somebody in mind. And I'm thinking, well, then why is the job posting up? That's just wasting a lot of folks' time. So yeah, I think the hiring companies just need to be a little bit more intentional about that and be aware of their own biases. I talk a lot about biases because I think so much of hiring just boils down to biases, like who is the most like me, or it's the nepotism thing that you had mentioned. Who do I already know? I anticipate that it'll probably change a little bit if the shoe is ever on the other foot, I guess, in the market where the candidates have more of the leverage or power, where people are more relatively more employed, better employed, and are more comfortable, and there's not as many people on the market. Maybe then that kind of flips around. I just don't know if we're ever going to get to that point again, like we were in 2021 and 2022. Seems like that was kind of the boom, and never shall we return to that point again. What are your thoughts? Do you think the job market is going to rebound over time, or are we still kind of going to be in a slump for a while?
No, I think it will, and I think it's also getting to a point where the realization of looking at some of the folks who are making their way into the cyber with not having the depth and struggling is getting really, really serious. So I've been with organizations where there is a massive chunk of people who are entry level. You don't even have enough people in the organization senior enough to hold hands for them. Right. And then there's significant budget that's being burnt in bringing these entry level people. So I'm not saying don't bring entry level people, but it has to be a good mix. And there's a good ratio that needs to be in there. You can't just bring in 20 people and then have like 3 people who can just mentor them. Right. So it's not going to simply work. So I think that aspect definitely needs to be looked at. And again, I'm going to touch on licensing. I think you start licensing people, then you really know who has it. That's my first job requirement. Do you have the license? Right. And it's been tested. It's not just tested from an expertise perspective. It's time tested. Maybe we have, CPD kind of a equivalent, right? So you have, continued professional development that happens in some of the certs. But I think that will create on how we also see in some of the security cleared jobs, by the way, which is a completely different can of worms. I'm not going to open that, but they kind of operate like a mafia of their own. But once you have that licensing replace the certification, once you have this credible pipeline of individuals who can perform the jobs, been time tested, experienced, have the expertise, I think we will see more weight on the side of the candidates right now, which is not right, which is like less jobs and thousands of candidates. And I think this is where the real challenge is that you don't know who's what based on I've seen people who pivot to cyber like anything. I don't think so. There's any other sector that I've seen besides cyber where the career change happens. I think we've done a damn good job of promoting the certifications in cyber like anything, right? So, and that creates this whole fluff and whole
How do you, I guess, how do you see there being a differentiation between the certifications that we have now, where you do have the CPE requirements and people are just racking up a bunch of webinars, and actual licensure? What would be the requirements difference in your mind? Like, is it practical tests, kind of like we see with the OSCP?
Yeah, 100% hands-on. I don't think so. Anything less than hands-on is going to. I don't know if you've ever been through this. I've been a lot of large-scale cybersecurity incidents, and I can tell you have people who have no expertise. They're just Googling. They're Googling what to do. Those are not the kind of people that you need in a crisis situation, right? This is not just individuals. I've even seen organizations who have this full incident response plan, and the incident happens, and as this famous Mike Tyson saying, everyone has a plan till you get punched in the face, right? So, and then that incident is a punch in the face, and no one knows what to do, right? And you need these individuals who have been through the war, who have the scars, who have lived through incidents, who are not just coming through a boot camp, right? I think that's what we need, and we also need to, at the same time, fix that challenge of how we are doing that entry level hiring. I think that's even broken as well, right? I mean, it's something I see. We see entry level candidates, who. The way it is put is like a senior level polish on it, right? That's not entry level. That's like exploitation wrapped in delusion, right? So, hey, I need someone who's 3 years experience, has all of these experience, and but it's entry level. So that means I'm just going to pay you entry level, but my requirement is like more. So we've broken that process as well. So yeah, I think that's how we fix. I think I keep. Perhaps saying more than I should be saying it. I think we really need to start hands-on testing, even on the certification, even if we can't get onto the licensing construct right now. As many certifications, they can change themselves from just an MCQs kind of a thing to more hands-on testing. I think that will give a lot of validation on, someone has done that, right? Which we apparently find missing right now.
Well, to your point from earlier on entry-level hiring, the SOC analyst roles, which was long kind of traditionally been known as the primary entry-level starting point for somebody going the more technical disciplines in security, those roles are starting to disappear with tools getting better and companies thinking that they can just have an AI program that basically analyzes alerts better than any single human. How do you square that circle? How do you fix that problem if it's more cost effective for a company to use a tool? Even an MSSP, for instance, I saw a post not too long ago where the guy was talking about how there's an MSSP that just laid off all their tier 1 analysts and replaced them with a tool to do all the initial alert analyzing.
I think that we're only looking at L1, right? So L1 SOC analyst, which is now largely I won't say they're being replaced. I think the number's been reduced. Mm-hmm. So it's just that you can cut through the noise a little bit more effectively. And we yet to see any kind of data behind it, if it's really working or not, because it's not that AI has simply resolved the whole triage function, right? We still see a lot of things that can slip through as false positives, which should not be. I think we've just seen a reduction in the number of SOC analysts, which is fine. I think what that means is now we have a tool where we can make an individual go 10x, right? So, and we can elevate them a little bit more than what they're currently at, but it does not take L2 away. It does not take L3 away. So I think we're going to see more of that come through. And I don't think organizations are going to just flip the switch and say, hey, we all turning into this AI-based triaging now, and that's it. It solves the world problem for us. It's not solving it. It's a cheap problem to solve. Even if you look at from an organizational budget perspective, having a SOC analyst being replaced by an AI is not massive cost saving. It's a $10 problem to be solved, right? But it's not like $1 million problem to be solved, right? So, but yeah, but we still need these entry-level people as analysts, like junior engineers, right? Security engineers. We need junior architects. Architecture is disappearing from cyber all of a sudden, right? So I think we still need like junior GRC people. We need policy writers. We need risk people, right? So there's a whole, stream of different kind of entry-level roles that exist. But I think what we are doing is we are having like 6 rounds of interviews for a SOC analyst, right? You're not the NSA, right? You're a regional healthcare provider. Just relax, right? This person is just going to run through a script and, has a triage workflow to execute and say yay or nay, right? That's as simple as it is, right? So I hope we can somehow speed up the whole hiring process. It's super slow, right? So, yeah.
Well, and I often talk about that. I think a lot of these downstream effects of the job market being so crowded is that, these interview processes get longer. And I think it just boils down to risk aversion. Companies don't want to make a mistake in hiring. They have fear of missing out on the best possible candidate. So they want to make absolutely 150% sure that they're hiring the right person, and their way of doing so is just to extend the number of times that somebody's talking to that person, which, I would say if you're asking the right questions, you can get that done in a couple of rounds, but not everybody believes that way, obviously. So, but yeah, we're coming up on time here, Ankush. So just one last question for you. Is there anything that we're not talking about in the industry, but we should be, especially as it relates to hiring?
I'll be brutal on that answer, right? I think what we're not talking about, we're not talking about burnout. I think we're not talking about fake leaders, toxic culture. I think the way we punish candidates for not knowing niche tools instead of teaching them. I think the way we ask people to take a pay cut for a foot in the door while execs, cash out bonuses. I think cyber hiring isn't just broken. I think it's quite honest, it's dishonest, and it's time that we own that. I think that's what we're not talking about.
Yeah, well, and so many people would agree with you on that point for sure, especially in this market. So it's a great point, great place to end. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way to do so?
I think LinkedIn, yeah. Don't start with a cold message, I accept all invites, you want to connect, be normal, say why you want to connect. And, as I said, I don't decline invites unless they're fake. But yeah, networking helps. Just feel free to connect me on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Sounds good. And we'll put your link in the position or the episode description as well. Well, thanks for your time, Ankush, and thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Talent Gap Fireside Chat. Don't forget to follow our page on LinkedIn and like and subscribe on Spotify and YouTube. Hit that notification bell to be notified when we drop a new episode. New episodes air every Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern.